So first of all, thank you very much. I'm very honoured to be up here on the podium with such illustrious people, and I would like to say that although this has the APA's name as well as C-DAC, it's actually Dinesh over there who's done the enormous majority of the organisation and making this happen. So it's a real pleasure to be here, especially because this is an exciting time in terms of the APA. I've been involved with digital preservation for longer than I care to remember, probably at least 20 years. And this year is the culmination of many of the activities. We've gone from doing a few practical things, identifying problems, moving into research, and now I think we, and indeed globally, as you'll hear from my colleague Ruben, things are being demanded of us, those of us who take part in this activity, which we must step up to. And I hope that after this conference you'll see that there is a lot of activity, and we are in the process of stepping up to the demands of governments and commercial organizations and indeed the general public. So what I'd like to talk very briefly about is just an overview of the APA, so you have a little better understanding of it, as it says past, present and future. I'd like to explain the links to CDAC, and then have just a broad view of digital preservation, just to put it in what I hope will be an interesting context, and lead in then to my colleague Ruben's talk about these new demands and new opportunities which we all have. So the APA was set up in 2007 after committees in Europe recognized the need to bring together the large organizations, large scientific, large government, large library, large archive organizations, because none of them could do it by themselves. It's a big problem, digital preservation. It's a membership organization involving large scientific organizations, including CERN, and you'll hear about that later, the European Space Agency and others. We came together and produced a strategic plan to identify, in a broad view, the research which was needed to support the activities. That was a 5-year plan. We renewed that recently, and as you'll hear, we've been implementing those plans within our own resources, but also largely through European funded projects. And it's been a really exciting time. As my introduction said, we looked at digital preservation. The OEIS standard formed a basis for the work there. That's been updated. We've now completed the audit and certification standard, which fits so well into the theme of this conference. But we've also, in the process, found out what users really worry about through extremely large surveys and the PARS Insight project. We did research to produce prototypes of tools, again, to find out what worked, what addressed those problems in the CASPAR project. And we've moved now, and this year is the culmination of the CDAC project, which is taking that research and implementing them into solid production type services. So all of this is, of course, open source and freely available to everybody. And finally, as we'll come on to, I think, in many of these talks, digital preservation is not really an end in itself. It's there to benefit in the end, society as a whole. But sometimes there are issues about use sharing of data, and so we've done work there to find out how to really get people focused on this, to share and reuse and exchange their data. And overall, a little bit more from my colleague Ruben, there are many things are fragmented. There has been a lot of research in many countries, many continents, including India, but it does tend to be a little fragmented. People tend, it's a natural human tendency to focus and believe that their solution solves the problems. And in part, we're driven to that. Those who research are driven to that because of the way the funding is set up. But it's important to have an overall view, because everything is changing and we need a way to cope with those changes, to identify how all of these different components, different ideas, different techniques fit together. And the Aparsan project, we believe, has done a lot of work in that area, and you'll hear some more about that in other papers. So, and the APA is evolving. We started as a fairly simple membership organization. We held conferences, we did a little work, and through those EU projects, which have allowed us to do a significant amount of work, we're evolving to a centre of excellence, just as Dinesh's organisation is, providing training, consultancy, services, tools, and so forth. And again, on the theme that no one organisation, no one person can do this, all of these things are provided, of course, by APA staff, such as myself, but also the APA members, bringing together all of our expertise. And so sometimes we're called a virtual centre of excellence because of that distributed contribution. The links to C-DAC, for me, go back to, and in particular to Dinesh, go back to 2009, led through various reports to the C-DAC Centre of Competence. And that is now a member of the APA, which I'm very pleased to report. In terms of digital preservation, I'll take quite a biased view on this. Originally, there was a focus on documents, the library world, the memory institutions. But now there's a concern about all types of digital objects. And there's a great deal of data being produced, a data deluge, and that needs to be taken care of as well. And one of the key ideas that's evolving now are the data management plans, but a lot of those depend on placing that data in a trusted place. And so, again, I'm very pleased to say that the appropriate ISO standards are, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. And in the future, if you think back, so I guess this is 30 years, 25 years, 24 years. The web hadn't begun, XML hadn't begun. There were relatively few internet hosts. And we were concerned about things like simple spreadsheets and simple document formats. Around now, we're to Web 2.0. XML is pretty well everywhere. We've got huge numbers of internet connections, vast amounts of data, and we have demands for making the results of especially publicly funded research to be open and usable by society. In the future, again, this is more for amusement than anything, you can just go up an exponential curve and put these sort of numbers in, and I guess what one needs to move from is something that's even now very human intensive to something that's much more, much better supported by automated systems. So I'm not talking necessarily about artificial intelligence and so forth, but there are a lot of things that people will be demanding in future. So building on that theme, you see now There are reports like the big data that talk in terms of billions, tens of billions, hundreds of billions of whatever currency you like coming out of the better use of the data that's available. There are books and studies about how science can be vastly accelerated by better use of the data that's already been collected. There's the Riding the Wave report I was connected with that talks about how society and citizens can benefit. So all of these things are really challenges to us, those involved in digital preservation, that we need to step up to. And here are a few more quotes from these are politicians in Europe. Data is the new gold. Great things are expected of us. But of course, one can look at it the other way, that the real requirement is that we need to deal with the vast bulk of this data, and we need to enable it to be combined together, because that's where the value comes from. So I think I'm running out of time, but this is the statement from the Riding the Wave report, and it's a vision that we have. So it's, again, digital preservation is not a means in itself, it's a way to benefit society as a whole. There are various views of this. Some things are transient, we cannot preserve everything forever, and it's a matter of discussion, not only amongst those involved in the technical side, but society as a whole, politicians, leaders. We've come together and produced this rather strange diagram that talks about preservation but links it to the usability from which derives value, from which we'll be able to generate business cases and business models which will then enable, fund the preservation, but more importantly, lead to benefits to society. And you'll see a little more about this later in the conference. So I'd like to hand over now to my colleague Ruben, who has a much more focused, I guess, view on where we're going, a much better understanding of the world out there.